Harvard Divinity School.
Reiki, Energy Medicine, and Post-Materialism, April 5th, 2023.
My name is Giovanna Parmigiani, and I'm the host of this series organized within the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative at the CSWR here at Harvard Divinity School. This series focuses on ways of knowing that are often labeled as non-rational, traditionally referred to as gnosis in Western philosophical and religious traditions, and often understood in contraposition to science. These ways of knowing are becoming more and more influential in contemporary societies, popular culture, and academic research. What is the place of spirit possession, divination, and experiences perceived as out of the ordinary in our lives? How can we study and approach this type of phenomena? Going beyond dichotomies such as body and mind, ordinary and extraordinary, reason and experience, and matter and spirit, this series hosts scholars of different disciplines and practitioners interested in exploring and expanding the boundaries of what counts as knowledge today. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's guest, Dr. Natalie Dyer. Dr. Dyer is a research scientist with Connor Whole Health at University Hospitals and the president of the Center for Reiki Research. Dr. Dyer studies the effects of Reiki biofield therapy on physical and psychological health and lead efforts to educate Reiki practitioners and the public about Reiki research. As shamanic Reiki master, Dr. Dyer's research is primarily focused on mind, body, and biofield therapies for improving psychological health and well-being. Dr. Dyer also conducts research on universal love and is the co-creator of the Universal Love Scale, a psychometrically validated measure of the embodiment experience of universal love. So thank you, Natalie, for being with us today, and welcome virtually at HDS.
Thank you, Giovanni. I'm so happy to be here. I like we said earlier, I love the Harvard Divinity School. So
wonderful, because you spent some time at Harvard in the past, right?
I did, yes, 5 years after my doctorate.
Do you miss us?
I do, very much.
Wonderful. So today we'll talk about the role of Reiki and energy healing in improving health and well-being, about the possibility of non-materialist scientific paradigm, and we'll talk about your latest research on universal love.
Sounds good.
Wonderful. So Natalie, let's get to the basics. So what is Reiki? How did you get interested in it? What's your relationship with it? And if you have any backstory to share with us, I always love to start our conversation with that.
Okay. I'll just define it first for those who don't know. So it's a Japanese word, which Reiki, so two words, Rei, which means universal, and Ki, which means life force energy. So it's translated to universal life force energy. Some people define it as universally guided life force energy. There's various ways of defining it, but basically that's what it means. And it's a form of biofield healing. So there's other forms from different traditions throughout the world. So this one originates in Japan, Qigong, for example, from China. And then there's ones that have developed within the Western medical system, like therapeutic touch, which nurses developed for treating patients. So biofield healing basically is a practitioner who is trained in some methodology, and the caveat is that we don't actually need to be trained in this. It's I think it's a very natural form of healing, where life force energy, spirit, chi, whatever you want to call it, is channeled within the healer and given to the healee or the client or the patient to balance their life force energy. So it affects the energy and the information within their body and around their body as well, if you want to, their electromagnetic field or their aura, whatever you want to call it. So how I got interested in it, it kind of just came to me. So I was doing my PhD at the time. I've heard of Reiki before, but wasn't calling me. I wasn't interested in it, didn't know anything about it. But I went to an event. It was a charity for, I think it was an African orphanage. And it was like a kind of a psychic fair sort of thing that some of my friends were going to, and thought, okay, I'll go. And you pay $10 and you get some kind of reading from various psychics and healers. And I came a little late, so all of the good psychics were taken, and there was like a Reiki person, and I was like, okay, I'll just go to this Reiki person. And at that time, I was doing a lot of meditation, more than I am now, unfortunately. I had more time during my PhD than I do now, I guess, so that I'm spending a lot of time in meditation, working on my energy field a lot, being very present, connected to nature. And I felt like in a really, really good space. And so I went to the Reiki master, and he checked out my energy system, and he went through my chakras, and he said, wow, you've been doing a lot of meditation. Your energy is super clear and balanced. And I felt, okay, yeah, I definitely feel that way. So he's picking up on something. And he said, there's nothing for me to work on today. And so do you want to just talk? And so I was like, yeah, what's Reiki? And then I thought, wow, this sounds really, really interesting. I'll take the training. So I just ended up taking the training. I didn't believe in it. It was just kind of like serendipitous. I just was led to it. It's like, I'll take the training. And then I'm like, I don't really believe that this even works. I don't know what I'm doing. But so he was like, why are you here? I'm like, I don't know. But once I'm an evidence-based person, I can't help it. So, but I'm also drawn to these things, like these interesting practices and techniques, very open-minded, but also very skeptical. So I didn't believe it until I saw the effect of it. So once I did the training level 1, I had some friends over at different times and practiced on them, and seeing the effect, feeling it too, because I wasn't sure what's this energy, what is energy going to feel like? And it feels like you're energized, feels tingly, feels like you have energy, obviously, to do something, like you've had a lot of coffee or caffeine or something. And so it feels like this flow going through, and it's different for everyone, but that's how it was for me. So I was like, wow, I can actually feel energy. And then seeing the emotional response in people, and the physical response. So reducing pain, crying, it's a big part of Reiki and energy medicine, is this emotional release. So seeing my friends release old wounds and traumas on the Reiki table was quite powerful. And then feeling it myself, feeling that compassion, that empathy that kind of went with it. And Reiki's it's an interesting thing. So much came of it that I wasn't anticipating, like an increase in intuition, this connection with others. Just feeling their feelings. I mean, a lot more empathy and compassion. So it was just like immediate, valuable feedback. And wow, I'm really actually helping people this way, getting at some deep stuff. So then I continued in the training until the Reiki master. So Reiki's been incredible. I think it's absolutely changed my life. And I think that's true for a lot of people that have gone on that journey as well. So yeah, and then it just naturally, because I was already doing my PhD, it changed a lot for me. My PhD was in a materialist paradigm, which we'll talk about later, and looking at like a psychopharmacological approach to anxiety, specifically anxiety, but all mental illness really, and looking at like, okay, what's the neurochemical situation with anxiety, and how can we fix that with drugs, for example. And then when I got into the Reiki and more meditation, I was like, there's something deeper going on here. And so my whole interest changed. So I started getting into more research on mindfulness, meditation, and Reiki. So that was early on in my PhD, and I had to like be patient and wait to get through, and then start doing some of the research once I was into my postdoc. So that's my story of Reiki. And
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And since I want us to be on the same page, sharing some personal, aspects of our research, I was also trained in level 1 Reiki. And it happened to me on my fieldwork, during my fieldwork. And I distinctively remember this feeling in my hands once they were activated, of a kind of cold, hot feeling, like they were very hot, but very cold. Actually, if I touched my skin, it was cold, but I felt a kind of very strong heat in the palms of my hands. I that also was important for me, although I decided not to go through the whole, all the levels of Reiki. Energy healing remained an important aspect of my practice as well. So I'm very happy to talk also about this with you. I have a number of questions, but before, maybe you mentioned that you are an evidence-based person. So what's your academic background more in detail? I think you mentioned slightly, but
Yeah. And there's different forms of evidence. So for me, obviously, just as a caveat, doing those Reiki sessions, that's, anecdotal, personal. Wow, this is really helping. But then I get into the more empirical research as well. So my academic background, so I guess going all the way back to high school, I was just very interested in truth. I mean, even before high school, growing up in sort of a family where there's a lot of pathologies and a lot of lack of emotional regulation and just like a lot of upheaval and immaturity and kind of like, this isn't right. Like just kind of asking questions like, what's truth? What's, there's more to life than this. And so my interest was in the mind and also in the life sciences, so biology. So psychology and biology were my main interests. So for my bachelor's, I went to the University of Toronto and I got a double major in biology and psychology. So studying the mind and the body. And yeah, like I said earlier, I was kind of a materialist academically, but definitely a spiritual person. So I was living in these kind of two minds, as I like to call it, or like the split self, where I was having all these experiences of out-of-body experiences at night, for example, powerful ones, intuitions, mostly in dreams, like psychic dreams, all kinds of experiences. And then just like a deep connection with, if you want to call God, source, what felt like my real home, just kind of this like, I know I'm here for a short period of time, and I know like I'm really connected to this bigger consciousness, if you want to call it that. And so what am I doing here? So a lot of questions that I was asking. So I'm doing all this work in biology and psychology, and I'm having all these other experiences that are not congruent with what I was learning. And I was kind of disappointed that the academics, at least at University of Toronto, were dismissing all of the things that I was experiencing. And understandably, because we're in this materialist paradigm still. And so I kind of was going back and forth a lot. And it wasn't until I started in the Eastern practices, like the meditation and the Reiki, like I mentioned earlier, that I really felt kind of an embodiment in all of that. Whereas before it was kind of like knowledge seeking, I guess I could say. But I carried on, and then I started, I did my PhD at Queen's University, which is also in Canada, in Kingston. And that was in neuroscience. So kind of blending biology and psychology. And I studied the neuroregulation of anxiety. So looking at the neurocircuitry and chemistry of fear and fear-related behaviors and anticipatory fear. And because I had a history of anxiety myself. So a lot of scientists, what they study is personally relevant as well. So there's often some kind of story there. So I had anxiety and depression as a child. A lot of my family did, mix of genes and environment, of course. And I thought, yeah, pharmaceuticals, that's kind of the way to go. A little bit of therapy, yeah, but it's a brain thing. let's fix it in the brain. And then, yeah, started these practices, like I mentioned, shifted my worldview in a more embodied, deep way, rather than a surface area. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to shift into this kind of research when I'm done my PhD. So I was lucky enough, super fortunate to get a position at Harvard University in Langer Mindfulness Lab. So she studies mindfulness and the connection between mind and body, and putting your mind or your psychology in certain states and measuring the body. So playing with your perception of time and seeing how the body actually follows your perception of time rather than what we would consider objective time, and a lot of really cool, interesting studies like that. And then I did a second postdoc at Harvard Medical School. I couldn't leave Harvard on yoga research. So that was looking at stress, anxiety, and in populations that are experience a lot of burnout. So teachers in urban areas, nurses, veterans, firefighters, frontline professionals, essentially is what they call them. So giving them the tools that I found useful as well. Love yoga. I've been doing yoga for 12 or so years, and giving them those tools and then measuring their psychological states after they've engaged in that. So that's my background and how it kind of transformed over time. And to this day, I'm still doing that kind of research, integrative medicine, mostly for psychological health, but also for pain and different medical conditions as well.
Wonderful. But can you tell us some of your findings? So what did you find? What does Reiki do?
Yeah, so I've done about 4 or 5 Reiki studies now. I should know. And the first one was a large scale study. It's still the largest Reiki study conducted. And it's what's called a pragmatic trial. So a lot of these studies, there aren't a control group, and that's okay. You know, there's different kinds of research. It doesn't always have to have a control. Of course, certain aspects of studies need to have control, but this was called a pragmatic effectiveness trial. So we took personal Reiki practice, so not in the hospital, private practice across the United States. And every time they had a client come in, they did a pre and post assessment of various symptoms. So again, anxiety, stress, those are big ones, pain, fatigue, nausea. And then we saw dramatic improvements just from the one Reiki session. So that was published in 2019, I believe. And that's when I joined the Center for Reiki Research. They were looking for someone to help run that study while I was doing my postdoc. And then we did another study. Actually, we got more details from that. We also did a qualitative assessment, which was published this year, last year, actually. We're in 2023 now, looking at what is the experience of receiving Reiki, because I think that's a big part of its transformative power, is what the client or the patient experiences during that session. So I mentioned earlier the crying and the emotional release that happens. So we were interested in that subjective component. So we identified 8 themes. So relaxation, that's a really common one. People feel very relaxed. So it elicits what's called the relaxation response, or putting people out of their fight and flight into their parasympathetic or rest and digest state. There's physical sensations, body sensations, energetic, what we call energetic sensations. So weird, like waves of energy, or like auditory, so perception changes. So we see colors with eyes closed. We might see multiple colors. We might hear certain things. We might, a few of the clients smelt different things. So that's really interesting. But the visual aspect is a big part of it. And then the emotional component for sure. So usually crying, or feeling like something was released that was deeply held, or just positive emotions like feeling love, divine love, unconditional love. And also some people go on a kind of a spiritual journey, is what we called it, where they feel like they travel somewhere, or they meet a deceased relative and they're given a message, or some kind of what they would consider a spiritual being, whether it's an angel or some kind of religious figure. So that's kind of the map of the experience of Reiki. And so now our next paper is looking at what that kind of relationship between that experience and those changes in outcomes. So what we found, and it's not published yet, but we're presenting it at a conference in 2 weeks, is that emotional component, so having that emotional release, as you would expect, affects anxiety, depression, and well-being, a lot of like emotional aspects. So having that release actually does reduce anxiety. It does reduce depression, whereas having these body sensations reduces pain. So it's interesting how like different experiences during the session lead to different outcomes. So it'd be interesting to look at like chronic pain patients. Does that hold true for them? Do they feel more of a physical sensation during the Reiki? And is that really related to them reducing their pain? And people with major depressive disorder, for example, is there more of an emotional component there that they're experiencing? So we did that, and that's being written up right now. And then another study that's in the process of being published is a distance Reiki study, which I'm particularly interested in. Distance Reiki, I think that's really fascinating. And this was a program for frontline healthcare workers in the UK during COVID. So they were given 4 sessions of Reiki, and we looked pre-post at anxiety, stress, pain, fatigue, sleep, and overall well-being. And we see improvements in all of that. And we got qualitative feedback as well, like, wow, this is amazing. And there's a lot of people that are skeptical. They don't believe it, but they're suffering. So they're like, sure, free Reiki, why not? I'll give it a try. I don't believe it, but kind of like me, I didn't really believe it. And then they experience it. And, wow, that's amazing. So, I should say, like a study I'm working on developing right now, which is important, I think, is what are those key ingredients in the ability of Reiki to be effective. So I think if you speak to a lot of healers, love is a big component. Loving the other, loving who you're working on, feeling connected with them, compassion, but just like that straight unconditional love where there really is no distinction between you and the other, as well as like the ability to just focus and be present, be there. And so I think attention, focus, and love are really key ingredients in the effectiveness of Reiki. So we're developing a study to look at that, which I think is really key and important.
Wonderful. Just a clarification question for me, then I will ask some from the audience. You mentioned mostly psychological and emotional effects of Reiki, including, some help with pain. Mm-hmm. What are, according to you, the relationship between the biofield and the body? So it's Reiki healing the body in your experience, or is it part of, your future research on Reiki at any point? I don't know.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, what's the relationship between the biofield and pain?
And the body, actually the body, like, healing the body, the organs. So medical anthropology is a disease aspect.
So the theory would be that the energy creates the body, essentially, that it's putting it together, it's mapping out where everything goes, the functioning of it, that the energy is primary and the matter comes from that. So if we get at the energy, the biofield, we're actually getting at more of the root of issues. So yeah, the theory is that any disruption in that energy is going to eventually become physical. So we can use it as a preventative measure as well. So energy healers might pick up on something that's like, oh, there's an imbalance here. There might not be any symptoms yet. It could be related to some emotion, some past experience that eventually might become physical if it's not taken care of. So I hope that answered your question.
No, absolutely. I'm familiar with that. I was wondering whether you would like to include this dimension in, more explicitly in your future studies or not. Let's move to some questions from the audience. So Marley, your first question will be addressed in a minute. Larry asks if you can talk about the relationships between Reiki and healing touch.
That's a good question. I'm not trained in healing touch, and it was developed by I think a German. Well, healing touch, and then there's therapeutic touch, so those are actually different. I am not sure. I just know that it comes from a Western world, not the Japanese origin, and it's more recent. So I'm not sure if it's influenced, where its influence came from. But I'm pretty sure it's working with the same concept where light touch with intention modifies the biofield in a healing way. So sorry, I can't give more details there.
No, I think it's great. Thank you so much. Yana asks, can we access your published Reiki studies, where we can find them?
Yeah, so you can you can search for my name in Google Scholar, but some of them are not open access. So you can send me an email and I can send you a copy. I don't think you can find the full paper unless you have journal access. If you have journal access through your institution, or you want to pay for the PDF, you can do that, or you can email me and I'll send you a copy.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for being so kind. Christine asks, great talk. First of all, thank you, Christine. I've been practicing Reiki for 20 plus years, and I'm a Reiki master teacher. Are there opportunities to get involved with Reiki research if one does not have a research or science background?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for practitioners. I mean, we need the practitioners to run the study. So that's a huge component. So you can email me your information and we can add you to a list of practitioners because, like I said, we will be running another study on that component of love and attention and healing. So we're definitely always looking for very experienced. We want very experienced healers. So.
Wonderful. I'm so happy when these links happen.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Anne asks, I teach an undergraduate course on alternative medicine and religion, and I'm looking for a good intro text for Reiki. Have been looking for some time. Any suggestions? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ann Baldwin just published a book a couple of years ago now, Reiki in Clinical Practice, I believe it's called. Sorry if I'm not getting that right. I'm going to do a quick, well, you can look up Reiki in Clinical Practice, a science-based guide. So I think that's a really good academic or medical option, because I think all like the other books are probably just for the practitioner, not for the student. So that's a good place to start.
Wonderful. And if you are interested in being in contact with Dr. Dyer, you can email to me if you want. And the email is already in the chat. And I will forward your email to Dr. Dyer if you don't find Dr. Dyer's email address easily. So let's move on. And then thank you for the question. There are many and we'll get back to them. But I would like to ask you, how do you navigate the status of scholar practitioner within academia or now within the space of your scientific research? Did you find any pushback from academic institutions? Or as Mali was asking, how is this research received among various religious communities, particularly Christianity?
Yeah, very good questions. How do I navigate it? So on the personal level, it's not very easy because I'm interested in both and I'm often pulled between them, even though I research Reiki, but I find myself kind of swinging from one to the other. I might spend a lot of time doing Reiki, making a YouTube channel, put some Reiki videos up, and I get really into that. And I think it's super valuable and I love helping people in that way. And then the scientist side of me just wants to like demonstrate that it works. And so then I'll maybe get more into the research. And so I kind of swing back and forth, always looking for that happy medium and balance. So I can't say it's easy because I always feel like I should be focusing more on one or the other, but I'm both of those things. So I'm always kind of going back and forth. I feel like doing the Reiki makes me, because it's such a loving, present thing, it feels, it makes me happier. Makes me feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. But I can't help wanting to learn and sharing knowledge. So there's a part of me that needs that mental stimulation of doing the research and discovery. I love the discovery of looking at the data and seeing the results. And I am open to it not working. If it doesn't work, I'm going to publish it. So my primary interest is truth, not proving something that I already believe. So in terms of navigating it in the institutions, I found, so when I was doing my PhD, there was some pushback and not with the institution as a whole, but individuals. So people I was doing my PhD with. So like I said, in the beginning, I was more materialistic. So I kind of transformed and they were like, what's going on with you? Like, what happened to you? And I even had a friend say, oh, you should just be a yoga teacher, not a scientist. And so thanks.
Oh, rude.
I know. And another student who said like, oh, don't get into pseudoscience because I said I wanted to study mindfulness. It's like, how is that? So ignorance, because using the scientific method for a human experience is science. For a practice that's been thousands and thousands of years, it is science. So just silliness like that. So, not really logical. So it doesn't really bother me, but it does kind of maybe inspires me a little more because like, oh, they want to dispel that ignorance. but since my PhD, so at Harvard, it was incredibly accepted. You think like, arguably the top university in the world, maybe the bias is that they're going to be super materialist and, traditional, but definitely not. Super open-minded. A lot of my colleagues were like, oh, I love Reiki. And so that was really, really nice. And support from I should say back a few years, support from my PhD advisor as well. As soon as I told her I was doing Reiki, she was like, oh, you're such a healer. I was like, oh, okay. So, and she was a yoga practitioner. So and I felt like that was meant to be, being with her and having that support, and helped me, get my position at Harvard and all of that. So I've been lucky. I think it's also, I'm a bit younger than some of the trailblazers like Rupert Sheldrake and, people that have received a lot of harsh backlash and violence even. So I think I'm grateful for them for like paving the way. That I think there's a lot more open-mindedness now, and integrative medicine, alternative medicine, whatever term you want to call it, is on the rise. There's millions of people getting treatments, and just a disenchantment with the medical system. So, and a lot of integrative medicine being integrated into conventional healthcare. So there's a culture shift happening. So it is a lot. It's getting easier, I think. I don't know if there was another question there, but
I'm so happy to hear that. And this is a little bit of shout out to my students here among the audience who are very interested in the figure of the scholar practitioner, because in a different field, but because I'm an anthropologist, so in anthropology, I live the same space, the academic one, with the same, attitude, similar attitude to yours, because what I experimented on the field became part of at least partially, of my way to inhabit the world. So if there's no, the old stigma around going native, which is a bad expression in inverted commas, it's easier than, let's say, 50 years ago. There's still some pushback here and there, and skepticism around the type of research that a scholar practitioner is, especially if it's not Christian. And this is to answer
right.
Mali's question, to inhabit the academic space. With this type
yes, I forgot the religious question. So it depends on the Christianity for sure, because you have laying on of the hands in some Christian traditions. Some religious people have an issue that Reiki is not from Jesus, for example. So in that tradition, it's Jesus working through the individuals, whereas some people say, oh, it's a Japanese man or something. Like I've heard some really silly things like energy doesn't come from a Japanese man. It's like, that's not what we're saying. He's just the one who like discovered this, working with it. So you get, there's a lot of so when we ran this big Reiki study, for example, there were a lot of Christians getting Reiki. I think a third of the sample were Christians. So some of them are open to it. Now the Catholic faith, I believe, released an article, I'm not sure where it was published, against Reiki. So saying that, do not do Reiki. This is like against the religion. And so of all the religions, Catholic is the only one that has explicitly said no to Reiki, essentially. So
my interlocutors are all Catholic and they all practice Reiki. So
well, there you go. Yeah. So it was someone in the church. It's not, you can't speak for all.
No, I think
Catholics.
The official doctrine.
Because I was raised Catholic, and I wouldn't, I'm not anti-Catholic. I'm not, so I think it's one person, one article doesn't speak for the whole religion and all its people. So,
well, the lived religion aspect is always very interesting beyond, formal,
even, yeah. And I think there was, I'm not good with Bible quotes, but I was reading the New Testament a while, like a year ago, just like, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm interested. I read it before when I was in school, and there is one part about your thoughts can heal. And to me, that's distance Reiki. So, and use your thoughts to heal. And I don't know the quote, forgive me, but it basically said in there that your thoughts can heal others. So it's not saying don't practice this. So.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. So another couple of questions from the audience. So Sam asks, can you can I ask, of course, how you conceptualize the energy body within the context of Western anatomy medicine? There seem to be some researcher who basically reduce the energy body to either a psychological phenomenon or as an epiphenomenon of the body in some other way, whereas others adhere to other non-Western theoretical systems. What is the current scientific perspective on this in theoretical terms?
No. Yeah, so a lot of people have different perspectives of it. So, and we like to be able to speak to anyone about it. So you can speak to the materialist and say it's, our electromagnetic field, our heart has a field, and that can be influenced. It can be influenced by our thoughts, our perceptions, and other people. So of course, like being loved, being touched, being hugged is going to be healthy for the heart and for its electromagnetic field. And in this case, it's coming from the matter, it's kind of like emanating from the matter. And then we have the more non-materialist approach where the primary aspect of reality is consciousness and love, and that generates energy, it generates the field, and then the body is built around that. So we know that there's energetic and fields that guide the development of neurons, for example. So we can speak in that sense as well, but it comes down to like, well, what's the origin of that? Where is that really coming from? So everyone has different perspectives on that. So my more perspective is that consciousness is fundamental and that energy comes from that, and then the matter develops around that. Of course, there's all interaction within that as well.
Wonderful. I think it's maybe the right time to ask you a question on non-materialist science as a cue to this question. So why are you advocating for it? What is the place today of non-materialist science within the sciences? If you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we define it as post-materialist rather than non-materialist because we're including matter, and we're not saying there is no matter. We're not dismissing all of the amazing achievements within that the materialist paradigm. But we're saying there's more going on. We need to expand our view of reality, and we need to account for a lot of the phenomenon that materialism is just saying basically doesn't exist. Psi phenomenon, for example, mental influence on physical matter. So all the achievements from quantum physics, for example. So we're about 100 years behind on updating our science based on those findings, where we see that the mind and the observer plays a key role in what manifests physically. So it's like, let's expand. It's not really like, let's get rid of all the materialists. And so post-materialist science is really about addressing scientific materialism, which largely states that the mind is nothing but the physical activity of the brain. And so consciousness is an emergent property of the neurochemical firing of the brain. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that's not true, such as people that are clinically, brain dead essentially, and they're revived and they've had incredibly vivid experiences that were more real than when their brain was functioning, for example, like colors that they've never seen before, and verifiable experiences like visitations from deceased loved ones that they didn't know were dead yet, for example. So there are some verified accounts with these, the psi phenomenon, a lot of verified accounts of children remembering past lives, mediumship that's been validated. Of course, you get muddy waters in this area. There are a lot of charlatans. There's been a lot of bad research, but there is some good quality blinded research on mediumship. And so the idea is that maybe the brain, and this isn't a new idea at all, this is probably more the original idea, but the brain acts more like a transceiver, a transmitter receiver of consciousness rather than a producer. So more like a radio. And a lot of the arguments of materialists is that, well, if you injure the brain, you injure the mind. Well, that's true of a radio too, or a television. You mess with the function, you mess with the physical aspect of it, you're going to change the reception, for example. So the idea with post-materialism is that the nature of reality may not be fundamentally material, based on these lines of evidence, and that we need to be at least open to studying that, rather than just rejecting it all. Because why not be open to it? If it's not true, we'll figure it out. We'll find that out, and then that's okay. But science needs to be an open method of inquiry. So that's really the idea behind that. And so there's a lot of science, I think 450 scientists that have signed this declaration for its post-materialist science. So we're coming together and saying, yeah, things need to change. There's a group of healthcare providers as well that say in medicine, we need to adopt a more post-materialist perspective, because there's a lot of, like, energy medicine, for example, helps people. And if we stay in this materialist view, we're not going to allow for things like Reiki in hospitals, which greatly reduce pain and anxiety and stress. And so we need to be at least open to including these things. And if they don't work, then, fine, get rid of them. It's not a problem. So I'm advocating for it because I think there's been a lot of suffering and damage from materialism. So this, taking all these resources and kind of like the survival of the fittest mentality, and not understanding our interconnection and our oneness. And so taking this like post-materialist or more spiritual perspective should theoretically lead to taking care of each other more and not being as selfish. And so I think it greatly will transform the culture, the global culture. And to me, that's a really important aspect of it. So.
That's amazing. I mean, from an anthropological perspective, I always teach my students in religion and healing that biomedicine, of course, has developed within mainstream Western modern ideas about the individual, like the individual and the subject and the person are completely overlapping. While, since I teach in a divinity school and we read lots about the anthropology of religion, we learn that for many, individual, subject, and person are not fully overlapping, open, like porous, let's say. And to me, your post-materialist science manifesto is an opening up to the possibilities of how to think about a medicine that includes and copes with others' ideals about the individual. And so I salute it with, great excitement. So thank you for being willing to do that within your field. Thanks a lot. Before moving to the question, because there are very many and very interesting, I would like to touch on the wonderful universal love scale, because I think it's very important. When I heard a talk from you on YouTube, and I was really, really very moved, I would say, from it. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, sure. So the universal love scale is what it sounds like. It's a scale to measure universal love. And it's a self-administered scale. We're not like measuring something physical. It's a self-report scale. So if you study anything in science, you need to have a way of measuring it. So when we study compassion, or we study empathy, or depression or anxiety, we all have these self-report questionnaires, because how are you going to know if something changes if you don't have some way of measuring it? So you can't measure anxiety. You can look at like stress responses physically, but with anxiety, it's really like an internal, like I'm worried about this or that. So it's a largely psychological thing. And so to define universal love, we define it as unconditional love for all of existence, that is beyond the subjective self. So whereas, in comparison, a lot of people think of love in general as like for a certain person, or like there's obviously the Greeks had so many different versions of love. There's platonic love, and there's romantic love, and a lot of them involve like the ego. So romantic love can be very painful, for example, and there's a lot of attachment and dramas, and universal love is kind of the root of all love. It is pure love. So it's love without attachment, love without desire. It's just love for love's sake. So unconditional love in its purest sense. And the idea is that this form of love is the ultimate healer. This might even be the foundation of reality. So a lot of people, when they have these transcendent experiences, like near-death experiences, or even plant medicine experiences, any kind of mystical experience, common theme is this universal love. Like, wow, it was like all of reality is built on this love. And I see it as kind of the merging of consciousness into one. It's the unification of our consciousness, reconnecting. Whereas, some will say like fear or hate, or, is kind of the separation, and heavily involves the ego. So this is an egoless state of love for just love's sake, just full embodiment of love. So we wanted to study this, and still are studying this. So when I mentioned the Reiki study and looking at the component of love, we'll be looking at universal love as a factor in the healing effects of Reiki. So we realized to measure it, it's embodied. So universal love is embodied, and when it's embodied, there are certain emotions, behaviors, thoughts, and transcendent components. So these are the factors of the universal love scale. So the feeling of love is an important part of it, but also the desire to help others, or to reduce suffering, or to be a humanitarian, for example, is like a behavioral aspect of universal love. So we laid out all these different aspects of embodied universal love to measure it in this way. And so we correlated it to different aspects. So empathy, it's highly related to empathy, as you would expect, compassion, positive emotions. It's negatively associated with narcissism, of course, like ego states, aggression, anger. So this is all part of validating it as a construct. So our paper essentially validates universal love as a construct, like, okay, it exists as something. And here's how we can measure it. So
it's a big thing. I mean, huge.
Yeah, you got to play the game. It's like, yes, okay, I ran the study, so now universal love is a thing. So then it's available, and it's currently being translated in Turkish. Turkey has just recently, I'm pretty excited, transformed their hospitals and their education system to integrate alternative and complementary medicine. They've made a huge shift. So all of a sudden, I was noticing all these Reiki papers coming out of Turkey, like, what is going on in Turkey? And so they've made a huge culture shift over there. And so they're now going to be studying universal love as well. So, and I just think it's what everything comes down to, and it's super important, and hope to do a lot more research on that as well, and hope other people do too.
Wonderful. That's great. Thank you so much. There are a couple of questions from the audience that would like for you to better explain the connection between Reiki and spirituality. So I read one from this. From my understanding, Master Usui originally taught Reiki to his students as a modality for spiritual enlightenment, and noticed the side effects of physical healing. It's a question. I am curious to hear your insight on how this nature of Reiki might relate to post-materialism.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's a really good point. And it's kind of like what's happened with yoga a little bit. So yoga was to prepare the body for meditation, to achieve enlightenment, or samadhi, or spiritual insight. And with Reiki now, it's becoming like, some people don't like the term energy medicine because it's becoming like medicalized, and it should be more of a spiritual thing. But that's just a side note. Yeah, I think Reiki is a spiritual practice, and to connect it with post-materialism, it's one of what I consider to be the key lines of evidence in favor of post-materialism, especially when you look at distance Reiki. So when you're able to positively affect people at a distance, miles and miles and miles away, where their physiology even changes, not to mention their psychology and their emotions, then there's something going on a lot deeper. And I do believe that it is the consciousness, this non-local effect of consciousness, where we are all connected in some non-local way, maybe through like a fundamental entanglement, for example. So even if you want to take like the Big Bang approach to reality, like everything was connected at some point, and expanded outward. So with entanglement, any two aspects that were connected at one point are always connected. So we are all connected. And so the ability to influence someone through being in this very focused, loving. So like I said, loving is that unification. So using the love and the focus, you can connect in this way. I think to properly explain the truth about what is really going on with Reiki requires a post-materialist perspective. I can talk to materialists about it and say it's relaxing. And elicits the relaxation response, and that's healing. So, but I think to really get at the truth of it, post-materialist perspective is required.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. So, Mandy asks, did you notice similarities in having patient sessions not working, such as they were on antidepressant or were completely disconnected with suicide attempt?
So I'm assuming they mean like the Reiki not working if they're on antidepressants or something. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I find that you can kind of tell when someone's on an antidepressant, maybe not always, but I find there is like a muting of their energy. And that's kind of what at least anti-anxieties medications doing in the brain, is just kind of lowering the energy. It's like lowering everything. It's inhibiting activity in the brain. So I have found kind of this dulling effect, which makes sense. I've been on antidepressants, not that it's anyone's business. I'm not on them now, but I was on them. And it does it numbs a lot of aspects of like the richness of the human experience, which includes, the negative, but also the positive. So look how much poetry and music has come out of deep sadness and pain and suffering. And so it's a richness. And I think the medications can not only reduce the sadness or, the apathy, but also the pleasures and the connection with spirit as well. And in some side notes, some psychedelic research for treatment-resistant depression, a lot of those depressed people say, wow, the medication was just kind of numbing me and just reducing the symptoms. Whereas this therapy with psilocybin, for example, is taking me out of my ego and showing me all these patterns that I've contributed to the way I've felt, and gives them like a new perspective where they can essentially reprogram themselves. But getting back to the question, it's not that the Reiki wouldn't work. I think it always does something as long as the person is open and willing. But I have found that it's just like kind of like tuning it down. It's just kind of lowering the energy. And a lot of people have a lot of mental activity, and you can pick that up when you're working around the head region, like the energy's flowing there, and like, oh, okay, they're thinking too much. This is just kind of like, oh, it's kind of like dark. It's like just kind of tuned down a bit. So yeah.
Thanks a lot. There's so many questions. I'm scrolling through them. So there are a couple that ask maybe the connection between, in your opinion, between Reiki healing and either mediumship or shamanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So you mentioned it's shamanic Reiki. I often do. And that's because when I started doing Reiki, there was all this extra kind of things going on that I'm like, what's happening here? Like an animal energy would show up, for example, like just doing a session, and then there's like this lion, and I'm like, what is this? What's going on? Or seeing traumas and feeling like different aspects of the person kind of return, all these different things, and saying, I think this is a little bit more than Reiki. And some people would agree, and some people would say, no, that's Reiki. But I started to study some shamanic practices with different teachers, because I thought, oh, this is like shamanism, I think. And so I think they naturally go together really well. Like we create all these labels, right? We create these terms for what we're doing, but it's all healing. I think it's all healing within consciousness, and within this realm of consciousness and love, and activating and connecting with the realm of the unconscious. So to heal some people's ailments, we need to go deep into their subconscious and see like what's driving some of these beliefs and some of these behaviors that are not normally available to our conscious mind. So, and Reiki is a path to that. So shamanism and Reiki work really, really well together, and they don't even need to be called different things, really. And what was the other question? Shamanism and
mediumship.
Mediumship, yes. Yeah, that was something that was unexpected when I started doing Reiki, is connecting with deceased loved ones. And this happens a lot more with distance Reiki. And I think for me personally, in-person Reiki, it's more physical. You see their body there, you're moving around. For distance Reiki, it's a lot more inward, and you're kind of just like holding them. And so I get a lot more messages. And with distance Reiki, I've had deceased loved ones come through for people. And it can be really, really powerful. And I think it works the same way of connecting with love, being focused, allows you to connect with the bigger consciousness, with the consciousness of others, and any similar resonant frequencies of the individual. So our family and our friends, the closer we are, the closer our frequencies, our consciousnesses are like right there. Like, hard to really explain, but we're all really super connected. And the more emotionally connected we are, the more we can tap into our energy fields of the other. So very often there'd be a deceased loved one come through with some kind of message, and that can be really, really powerful. It's different than just working with the energy. It's a psycho-spiritual healing aspect of it. And I think they all work together with the same principles of, like I said, the non-local connection of our consciousness and love, allowing us to have access to this information, which is great because it's kind of like a safe mechanism where you have to be benevolent to gain all this access. You got to be in this state of love. You got to be focused and conscious rather than in your ego and in a materialist kind of framework. You wouldn't get access to this information.
Thanks a lot. A footnote from the religious studies scholar here. Shamanism is a very contested category within religious studies. So I think that for my students, we're talking about neo-shamanism and new shamanic practices. But this was just a footnote.
Yeah, shamanism is controversial. There's a lot of, yeah.
Anyways, I think, it was a clarification due, but I think what you wanted to say came through very brilliantly. Okay. Yes, so number of other questions. We're 2:00 now, but I think we can spend another couple of minutes. So Katarina asks, would you have any recommendations for the process of finding a Reiki practitioner that really clicks with me as someone who wants to try Reiki for my anxiety? Is it important, like therapy, to find one who you truly feel comfortable with?
Oh yeah, definitely. That relationship is super important because you need to let down your guard a bit. You need to be open. And the more you are and the more you're connected, like I mentioned with the love, that love connection is going to be really powerful component. If you don't trust the person or you don't feel comfortable, you're going to kind of close off a bit as a protective mechanism. And I think that's really important. So yeah, it depends if you want distance or in person. In person, you'd have to obviously find someone local unless you're willing to travel. And in that case, you would just Google people in your area. Get a feel for them. If you can have just a chat with them, see if you want to proceed. If they're not open to that, then that's your answer there. It's not worth your time. So they should understand that you want to feel comfortable with them. So have a quick meeting and ask them some questions. For distance, it's very open. You can look at different organizations' websites too if you want someone certified through some body. So there's the International Center for Reiki Training, Reiki.org. I think you can look and find Reiki practitioners in your area that way, or distance as well. So yeah, and definitely go with how you feel about the person. If you don't like them and you don't resonate with them and you don't feel comfortable telling them your deepest problems, definitely don't go with them.
That's wonderful. There's so many questions, and I encourage people from the audience to send them over to me so I can forward them to you. There are some asking where to study this kind of things, where are the PhD programs, and I might give my 2 cents on this as well. But please, we are wonderful. You, Natalie, you're wonderful, and the audience as well is wonderful with all these questions. But I think it's time to wrap up Thank you, Dr. Dyer, for your participation and wonderful conversation. And thank you all for having been with us. Please stay tuned on the activities of the CSWR, the Transcendence and Transformation Initiative, and of Nosologies. You can find all this information on the CSWR website that you can find in the chat box, including the registration link for our next Nosologies event that will be on April 26th. I will have a conversation with Professor Fadike Castor on multiple subjectivities and the ethnographic study of lived religion. Thank you all for being with us, and have a great rest of your day.
Sponsor, Center for the Study of World Religions.
Copyright 2023, President and Fellows of Harvard College.